Hey everybody, what is up? Chad Wesley Smith here for Juggernaut Training Systems and JuggernautAI, joined as always by Miss Marisa Inda. And today we're going to be talking to you about how to train the Trap Bar Deadlift. So with great trap bars like this, open trap bar from rep, Trap Bar Deadlifts become more and more popular, kind of always been popular in strength and conditioning, sport performance circles. So we're going to talk about some key technical points for it, some common mistakes to avoid when doing trap bar deadlifts, and then, really what is it good for, when is it appropriate to use, things to avoid from a programming sense with it. So first up on the technical side of things is going to be your foot placement and the alignment of the bar relative to your body. So as Marisa steps in here, in the same way that in a normal conventional deadlift, we want to have the bar over the midfoot, we need to do that same thing here with the trap bar deadlift. Just because of the shape and size of the bar, sometimes that's a little bit more abstract of an idea to come about. So as Marisa sets her hands on the bar, she wants to have the weight going right over kind of where her ankle and foot meet. So right through the midfoot. If you have people who have the tendency to let the bar get too far in front of them, sometimes I'll overcorrect this, and I'll tell them to get their wrists lined up with their ankle. And so that'll ensure that the bar gets far enough back. Some people, as they initiate the pull, the bar will drift out away from them. We want to avoid that. And then certainly we also, want to avoid the opposite side of things, the bar being too far back in the heel. And then as you pull, the bar swinging out and up rather than just moving up in a straight line. So another important technical idea about the trap bar deadlift to understand is the trap bar deadlift a hinge like a regular deadlift, or is it a squat? And the answer is, it's kind of up to you. It can be either one. You just want to make sure that you're consistent in the way that you're using it, because there's times where it's going to be appropriate to use it more like a squat with a lower hip position in the start. So if you're using this in sport performance training, general strength and conditioning, just as a heavy lower body exercise, then you probably want to start with a bit lower hips. If you're using it to build strength off the floor for your conventional deadlift, that could be a useful way to do it, is to get a lower hip position and a bit more leg drive. But there's nothing that says you can't use a trap bar deadlift as more of a hinging exercise as well, and just kind of a simpler way to keep the bar close to the midline of your body and keep the bar through your midfoot. So if you are using a higher hip position, you just want to make sure that your back angle isn't changing throughout the lift. If you're using something like, say, the JuggernautAI app, and you're making a distinction between those exercises of when you want to use one or when you want to use the other, you'd maybe create a custom exercise that says like trap bar deadlift hips high, just so for that kind of thing. But yeah, so if you're using the trap bar deadlift as like an RDL variation or something to drive more hypertrophy in the posterior chain, but wanting to make sure you're using it because you want to make sure that the bar stays really through the midline of your body and close to you, then going with that higher hip position could be good too. Or if you just feel stronger that way, that's totally a fine choice as well. So it doesn't have to be more like a squat than a normal conventional deadlift. It certainly can be if you want it to be, but it doesn't have to be. So the next cue that we like a lot for trap bar deadlift, for regular deadlifts, one that if you followed Juggernaut content for a long time, is to protect your armpits. So protecting your armpits is a cue that we use to get your lats as tight as possible and create a rigid torso off the floor. And this, I've probably been using this cue for, when did I start doing seminars? What year is it? 2025? I think I did my first seminar in 2010. But, so I've probably been using this cue for a good 12, 13 years. Protect your armpits. My older brothers used to tickle me till I pissed my pants and whatnot when I was a little kid. So I had to learn how to stop them from getting in there. And that cue, as soon as you squeeze, your triceps against your lats, or you try and stop yourself from getting tickled in the armpits, you protect your armpits, you create a lot of lat tension and a very rigid torso in doing so. So if Marisa was to not have well-protected armpits, she might round at the upper back, the bar might drift away from her. It's not as much of a problem typically with the trap bar deadlift. with the bar drifting away like it is in the conventional deadlift, but you still want to create that rigid torso position. And if you need a tickler, you can go to my Venmo. It's a Tickle Monster 420, and just send the money there. I'll show up to your house, tickle your armpits. Great deadlift technique. Now I want to talk about some common mistakes that we see in technique with the trap bar deadlift. And the first thing is going to be an overemphasis on the heels. Because you can get the bar so close to the midline of your body, you're not obstructed, with the bar running into your shins. Some people will do the trap bar deadlift where they're almost balanced back on their heels. So we want to avoid this where the bar is almost a little bit behind Marissa in the start. If she's able to wiggle her toes throughout the lift, all right, that's probably means that too much weight is back. And this is a mistake that people will make, sometimes in the conventional and sumo deadlift. In some people will do this in the squat, and you're not really engaging your hamstrings or your glutes that much better or any better by doing that. You're just worsening your stability by not having that full foot pressure. So we want to push, Marissa wants to push her full foot through the ground, maintaining pressure through the big toe, little toe, and heel, just like we do in the conventional deadlift, just like we do in the squat. And the next common mistake you're going to see in the trap bar deadlift, and this might have happened to you, and sometimes it's kind of an equipment issue as some bars are better balanced than others. This bar conveniently has, a line right through the middle of the handle, so the balance point of it is very easy to find. But sometimes, whether people are just not paying attention, they're getting so fired up in their technique that they kind of just grab the bar and go, but they grab the bar too far forward or too far back on the handle, and then it's either tipping forwards or backwards during the lift. So this is going to, pull you a little bit forward on your toes too much. Marissa was to grab the bar too far forward and it's tipping back a bit. That maybe isn't going to be bad from the execution and the leverage of the lift, but it's going to be really uncomfortable on your wrist and just not as strong of a grip. So, make sure during your warm-up sets, you're finding the good balance point of the bar. If you got to put a little piece of tape on there or make a mark or something, so where to put, like here with the line, I put my middle finger over that line. Next common mistake you're going to see with trap bar deadlift is something we've been doing this entire time. We've been doing high-handled ego lifting. Trap bars like this are great because they do have multiple handle options. And it's not to say that the high handles don't have an application. And certainly if you're taller, and Marissa's known for her height, the high handle could be a totally appropriate choice for you. But there's probably too many people who are using exclusively the high handle, and you can load up heavier weight, and that's all well and good. But depending on what you're using the trap bar deadlift for, it might not be the appropriate choice. So sometimes you might have to make the tough decision to spin that bar around. You can have that part behind you or in front of you, it doesn't really matter, and use the low handles. So, if I was to paint with a broad brush and kind of look at the average or the majority of people, they're probably going to get more benefit out of using the low handle in the trap bar. That's going to, put them in a bit deeper position at the start. So if you're using it to improve your strength off the floor in the conventional deadlift, if you are using it as a general strength and conditioning means, low or high could be applicable. Say, 6'2" and over is probably going to be more apt to use the high handles, leg length and proportion, limb proportion, kind of all things being equal there, which they never are. But don't think that just because you're loading up, kilo after kilo after kilo on the high handle, and then you get to a regular conventional deadlift, you're like, man, it's so hard off the floor. That's kind of a simple answer. That's sort of going to be your fault. So don't neglect the low handles. Sometimes they're a little bit harder to find the balance point on, but low handle, high handle can all have their purpose. Just don't, be only going for the high handles because you can do 20 or 40 or 50, 100 more pounds, whatever it is. And if you see this really huge discrepancy between what you can do on the low handle versus the high handle because of 2 inches or something, that should probably be an indication that you're missing some important component of your training. And finally, the last common mistake we see in trap bar deadlift technique is bad lowering technique. So we talked a bit about, is the trap bar deadlift a squat or a hinge? And when you're lowering the weight, you still certainly want to treat it like a hinge. So initiating from the top of the lift by pushing your butt back, keeping weight through the full foot rather than, your knees coming way forward during the descent or just dropping it from the top. And the concentric only stuff could have some application, certainly in sport performance things, but let's see the difference between a good versus bad lowering technique in the trap bar. Okay, she wasn't even trying to do that. So pushing the hip back, keeping the weight through the full foot, relative control of the bar on the way down. And there's going to be times where it's appropriate for slower eccentric, concentric only focused training. But if you're, just doing reps in a general strength phase as you're trying to get as strong as you can in your garage, initiate with hips back as the first move on the way down. Feel a little bit of load and stretch in the hamstrings and practice a proper hinging pattern. All right, so what is the trap bar deadlift good for? Who should use it? When should they use it? So first up, athletes, so non-powerlifting strongman competitors, but football players, MMA fighters, basketball players. Trap bar deadlift is a very common exercise to use with them. I use it with a lot of my jiu-jitsu guys. It's an easy lift to learn, typically a bit easier than conventional deadlifts or different kinds of squats. When you're looking for just getting a strength stimulus in a simple to learn, simple to execute way that kind of fits within the context of the rest of your training, then trap bar deadlift can be a great option. If you're not competing in powerlifting, and I do these consulting calls all the time for yearly JuggernautAI users, and the ones who aren't competing in powerlifting, I tell them, like, there's so much more flexibility and options in your training. You don't have to be bound by the conventional or, a competition depth squat, competition style bench press, and whatever, conventional or sumo deadlift from the floor that you would use in competition. You've got so many more options because the competition isn't part of it. And if the trap bar deadlift, you like it and it feels good and you want to make PR on the trap bar deadlift, well, then by all means do it. If you're training for powerlifting competition, you're can use this as part of what you're doing, but not all the time. So when looking at using the trap bar deadlift to build your conventional or sumo deadlift for competitive powerlifting, strongman, or just for getting those lifts up as much as you can, now you're going to want to look at using it, as a secondary exercise or tertiary exercise for building strength off of the floor. So using the low handles, even going low handles from a bit of a deficit can be beneficial for that. Could even help, with strength out of the hole in the squat a little bit, though I'd still use a pause squat over a deficit trap bar, but not a bad option necessarily. It's also going to be a great driver of neural force production, and this is going to hold true for powerlifters, strongmen, or non-strength athletes, because you can go really heavy on it, particularly from the high handles, and every bar and how high their high handles is a bit different. But it's an exercise that you should be able to go very heavy on, and in doing that, recruit a ton of muscle fiber and prepare your body to produce very, very high forces, prepare your nervous system to produce very, very high forces by exposing it to those really heavy weights. So if you need that as a neural strength stimulus for athletes or for powerlifters, trap bar deadlift can be a great option there. Also going to be popular as an injury workaround. Conventional deadlift, if you feel back stress in that and you don't in the trap bar deadlift, then, whether it's just for a session or a block of training or a more extended phase, that could be useful for powerlifters. That can be useful for any athlete. And you can further modify this by, raising it up on blocks. Like when I was coming back from my back surgery, I was doing trap bar deadlift and I started with the bar up on 4-inch blocks, like high handles from 4-inch blocks, then high handles from 3-inch blocks, then 2-inch blocks, then 1-inch blocks, then back to the floor, and then starting to transition to the low handles. But giving yourself a progression like that is a simple way to utilize graded exposure in coming back from injuries. And if you're a competitive powerlifter and you want to just do the trap bar deadlift for kind of general training phases, stuff like a bridge block in the JuggernautAI app, or your off-season phase and you're interested to see how much could I trap bar deadlift, or for a single or for 3 or for 5, whatever it is, and you're farther out from a meet where it's not as important that you're using the competitive exercise, then by all means go for it. Load up that trap bar deadlift, go as heavy as you want. If that's what's interesting to you in your training, do it. Just if you're trying to design the most optimal program for powerlifting, just do it farther away from competitions, or as you get closer, If you feel like it transfers well for you as a secondary exercise, then that can be useful as well. All right, so hopefully you learned something about how to better use the trap bar deadlift in your training, how to better execute the technique. If you like this video, like it and subscribe to the channel. If you're interested in getting the smartest program for you, check out the link down in the description and get a 2-week free trial of the JuggernautAI app, because it's going to look at, gender, age, height, weight, strength, experience, all that different stuff to create the smartest program for you. Thanks for watching.